Hi, thanks so much for joining us here at C3 Silicon Valley for our podcast. We're currently in our series called FOMO, where we're learning how to wait on God's will. Check out this message by our lead pastor, Adam Smallcomb. We hope you enjoy it.
We're starting a brand new series today, and I'm excited to kind of open up a brand new series after Easter Sunday last Sunday. Did everyone have a good Sunday last week? You came back. You came back. And you brought people. I'm thankful for that. But I want to read a passage of scripture real quick just to kind of set the tone for the sermon today. So if you've got a Bible, you can feel free to open up to the book of Romans. And from the 12th chapter, I want to read just two verses that are going to set the stage for what we want to preach on this morning. And it's Romans chapter 12, verse 1. It says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God," everyone say let God. Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Then you'll learn to know God's will. Today we're opening up a brand new teaching series centered around knowing the will of God. Anybody intrigued by this sermon subject? Knowing God's will. And I've simply entitled this sermon as the first installment of the series, Working Out God's Will. I feel like that's a good way to launch into the series, just to figure out how do we work out God's will for our life. Maybe for your husband's life, that's what you want to work out God's will for. Maybe there's someone that you think, I'm going to help you today. Well, you're going to be able to after today. Why don't you do something? Why don't you find 7 people, high five them and say, you got to work it out. You got to work it out. High five them. Tell them you got to work it out. San Jose, high five 7 people. Tell them you got to work it out. It's time to go to work. We're going to go to work today. Let's go to work. Can we thank our worship team at both locations doing a fantastic job taking us into God's presence. And of course, San Jose joining us live. You know what? You need to know this, Palo Alto. San Jose is a vocal campus because they love Jesus in San Jose. Come on, Palo Alto, do we love Jesus? I'm going to need your help preaching this morning. I decided that we're going to have some fun in church today. And I've got my teaching aids coming out. Do not be intimidated. Or maybe you should be. I don't know. Well, hashtag FOMO, everybody. The 3 people that cheered then are under 19 years of age. How many people have no idea what FOMO is? Just be real honest. Let's just get it out there. Thank you. Ever been in one of those meetings where everybody knows what they're talking about except you, but you pretend like you know what they're talking about? You know, when you're around some creative people, maybe potentially, possibly always they're younger than you, and they throw this stuff out there and you're like, yeah, I'm down with that. And you have no idea what on earth what they're talking about. Well, just to fill you in so that we can really kick off this series right, FOMO is a social media term, an acronym for fear of missing out. And many of you have had FOMO about FOMO. You've had fear about missing out on what is this funny language that I don't know anything about. That's what FOMO is. And we're starting a series called FOMO, where we're centering and we're waiting on the will of God, what it is to wait on God's will. And FOMO is not just a social media hashtag, it's a real thing. Anybody ever had fear of missing out on something before? I've experienced FOMO in my life. I remember before I started dating my wife, we were just friends, which means I was in the friend zone. And there is no fear like the fear of staying in a friend zone. Especially when it's with the girl of your dreams and you're stuck in the friend zone. I was in the best friend zone. That's deep, y'all. That's deep. You're just friendship bracelets and all that kind of promise rings, you know. It's like, oh man, I'm getting deeper in this thing. And I had fear of always being in the friendship zone. And at no time when I was in that zone did I ever wonder if this was God's will. I knew this was God's will. I'd tithe double. I knew that God owed me. I'm like, that's what I want, God. I tithe for this. I want that person. She, on the other hand, always prayed, God, is this really your will? This guy? This is the blessing you were talking about? And I'm like, yeah, it is. But as a pastor, this is the question that I would get more than any other question in ministry is people wanting to know what is God's will. What is God's will in this circumstance? What is God's will in this situation, in this life decision? I've got several decisions or options or different options I can take. And wouldn't it be easy if in life there was only one of two choices? What I found is that there's often several choices and decisions and possibilities of directions that you could take, but what is God's will? What is God's plan? I would like to know it. And I would think we would all agree that a good question to ask as we open up a series on God's will is, how do I work it out? How do we work out God's will? Because in many ways, I feel that working out God's will is like working out. That's what I feel. I feel it's like working out. You know, when you make a decision to work out, generally that decision to start working out is when you're sitting on the couch with an empty bag of Doritos next to you. That's when you're like, I need to work out. I need to work. Can I just preach real? Can we just do that today? It's like you've emptied the bag of Doritos. There's another one in the cupboard and you're contemplating, do I pop that one open or should I really work out right now? And that's when you kind of make a decision. I got to work out. But it's not that simple. Because when you go to the gym, I mean, the idea of working out is easy enough, but then you discover the gym is more than just a treadmill. Because you turn up at the gym and you realize, well, there's free weights and then there's fixed weights. There's opticals, there's hyperextension benches, there's racks and there's bars, there's leg presses, there's leg curls, there's lateral pull downs, there's chest pulls, there's belts, there's kettles, there's bands and there's boxes, there's cardio and there's mobility, there's bodybuilding, there's body slimming, and that's just before you get started. It's deep. It's difficult. And that's kind of how we approach the will of God. There are deeper dimensions than just saying, will I serve God or will I serve the devil? It's deeper than that. Because I already made the decision to serve God, so what next? I already made the decision to work out, but where do I start? Where do I start in this gym? And it's the same in life. You know, do I take a job in tech or do I teach? Do I invest into real estate or do I invest in the stock market? Do I homeschool my kids or do I public school my kids? Do I try dating websites or do I just go out more? It can be complicated. Even in church, it can be complicated. I want to join a spring group. Well, there's different kinds of spring groups. There's Pinterest spring groups and there's painting spring groups. There's workout spring groups and there's cycling spring groups and there's motorcycling spring groups. It's not as simple as making a simple decision. God, what is your will? God, now I've decided to discover your will. What is your will with the deeper dimensions that revolve around your will? Have I built the tension all right? Am I in your head right now? Because that's how I think. God, this is deep. And it's not only deep, the different dimensions also make it difficult. And inevitably what it produces and causes in our life, I fear, is a hesitation around decision making, a questioning, a second guessing, would it be, when it comes to making big decisions in life and sometimes even small decisions. But mainly in the decisions that may determine a directional course that our life could take. The question inevitably is, God, is this your will? I want to be aligned to your will, but I want to also walk by faith. But as I walk by faith, it's not so much faith. What I find is there's more fear of missing it altogether. Yeah. FOMO. Everyone say FOMO. You say it better than I do. But I want to know will. In Romans, we just read this in Romans, that Paul the apostle, he's writing to the church in Rome, and he's writing a letter or an epistle that is considered a very deeply theological letter. And in the first 11 chapters, we find that Paul is very theological. He's deeply theological. He outlines the theology of God's redemptive plan in Jesus, and he does it wonderfully too. In fact, Paul considered himself a master builder. He's like a master builder. I've laid a foundation, like an expert builder. He's like, if anybody could preach better than me, go ahead and try, because I'm like an expert. He's just clapping himself. He's just like, man, I'm just letting you know, because you're not clapping me, I'm going to clap. That's what Paul was doing. He's like an expert builder. I have set a foundation. I've laid the foundation. And then he gets to chapter 12 and says, and so, or therefore, indicating a pivot now to what we find is we move from chapter 12 into what is known as the practical part of Romans. Now that you have a foundation, now that I've explained a theological foundation of what Christ has done, here are the expectations that flow from that. Because Christ has done so much in our life, is what Paul is saying, and it's built off what Christ has done, is why we should do what he says. Yeah. Or at least we should want to do what he says. Right. And he says this in chapter 12, verse 1. Let's read it again. It says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. The apostle is not commanding us as much as he is compelling us from an understanding of the blessings that come from living this way. He's not telling, now that Christ has done all this, now you have to do this. No, he's saying it's your choice, but I'm compelling you and I'm pleading with you because I've seen what Christ has done in my life and what it is to live in his will and live in his purpose and how amazing that is. Now I'm compelling you, do not hold anything back, but discover what it is to live a life fully surrendered to God. Begin to discover what it is to live that life fully surrendered, fully serving, full of faith. And he makes it very clear that we don't live for God to receive his mercies. He's like, we live for God because we've already received his mercies. We're living from his mercies because we've already experienced his grace, because he gave it in advance, whether we would serve him or not serve him, whether we would follow him or not follow him, whether we'd give him everything or give him part. He's like, he still gave everything to you, so that should be the reason why you give everything to him. That's what he says. And this is when he goes on to say this. He goes on to say this, let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Check this out. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Then you will learn to know. I want to give you 3 elements to God's will today that I believe will help us understand his will in a real practical way. 3 elements. And I need you to write them down. So grab your pens out, grab your notepad, your electronic device, however you're going to be taking notes today. And there is a good chance that at the end of your note-taking, you will get a better position in heaven. But I can't guarantee that. It's just a theory I have. So write this down. I want you to write the first word down, which is work. Work. Write down work. Work it out. Work it out. Another way to say this would be to discern God's will. And I want to tell you that discernment is similar to but different from discovery. Discernment is similar to yet different from discovery. You have to work it out. Paul writes, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. His will is good, his will is pleasing, and his will is perfect. And in many ways, I feel like this is exactly what places weight on God's will. The fact that it is good. I don't want to miss what God has for me that's good. The fact that it pleases God, well, man, I really want to live a life that pleases God. But even above that, the fact that there is a perfect will for my life, I don't want to fall short of anything that's less than perfect for my life. Is anybody with me? That if God has a perfect spouse for me, I want to find that. If God has perfect parenting, I want to find that. If God has a perfect job for me, man, I really want to find that. And then what it actually does is it places a lot of weight to God's will. Because if it wasn't good, pleasing, or perfect, then I could hit or miss it. But because now the Bible's making that God has a perfect will for my life, I don't know if I want to miss out on that. I don't know if I can afford to miss out on that. I don't know if I can afford to go one more day not living that perfect, good, and pleasing will. Is anybody with me? Yeah. And so the question for me is, if it's so weighty, how do I not get it wrong? How do I work it out? I've been trying to build the tension. I feel like I've achieved it because you're so quiet. How do I work it out? And I wonder if God's will is a lot like weightlifting. I feel that weightlifting is somewhat intimidating. Would you agree? Yes. That even approaching weightlifting can be intimidating. To know that it's heavy, to know that there's weight involved with it, to know that it could crush me and I could die. That kind of intimidates me. And I feel like this is how we sometimes approach the will of God. We approach it from a position to really want to know how heavy is it. Let me know the weight. But hardly ever do we approach weightlifting, or if you do, you're doing it wrong, where you have to work out how much you can lift before you start lifting. How many people think we should have a little bit of fun in church and we should lift some weight? I'm not going to lift weight. But I do have my coach here, AJ, and I thought we could get AJ to lift some weight. What do you reckon, AJ? Can you lift some weight today? Come on, let's welcome AJ up. He's got shorts on, which is very convenient. And we do not need you to split any skinny jeans today on stage. But this is where I feel the will of God really works in our life, because if we try and calculate and assess how much we can lift before we lift it, then we're going to be stuck wondering for a long time. And it can cause a hesitation in our life to really know, how heavy is this weight? How heavy is this will, God? Man, it's good, it's pleasing, it's perfect. Man, I've got a lot of fear around this now. I don't know if I can handle this. But we don't approach it from that angle. We simply start somewhere. And we've got 95 pounds on here. And maybe you're like AJ, you know you can lift 95 pounds. How many people here cannot lift 95 pounds? You're like, that is not happening in this lifetime. Well, AJ, I've seen him lift 95 pounds. So maybe, AJ, you could show everyone how you can lift 95 pounds. Just show them how you do it. Here we go. Look at him rack that thing. And watch this. That's deep, people. That's a deep squat. Look at that. Easy. Easy. Rack it. I think we need more weight on AJ. He pushes me every day. It's my turn to coach him. Let's put some more weights on here. Let's add it on. Let's add another 40 pounds onto this. Let's go, AJ. Come on. Let's give it up for AJ. Let's give him some encouragement. All right, let's squat that thing. Look at this. Isn't that smooth as silk? Look at that. He could do that all day long, but we don't have all day. Let's rack that thing. How many people think we want to see AJ lift some decent weight? They're not convinced up the back corner. Would you up there like AJ to lift some weight? What about in San Jose? Come on, let's give it up for AJ. Let's put all the weight on. Let's put all the weight on. Now this would be 225 pounds. You know what? I hate knowing how much I'm lifting. Anybody else? They're like, do you want to know how much? Don't tell me. But this is heavier than you. Okay? Not all of you. But most of you. Okay. Or that image of you that you have in your mind. It's heavier than that. Okay. And so I don't think you should back squat it. I think you should go overhead. How many people think AJ should go overhead? All right, let's do this. Let's see. Let's give him some encouragement, like it's the CrossFit Open. It's the games. Come on, give it up for AJ. Here he goes. That's heavy. That's heavy. Here he goes. Up, up. Here we go. Boom. Look at this. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Come on, give it up for AJ. Wow. Wow. He taught me how to do that. I haven't done it yet, but he showed me real good. But this is what it's like when it comes to the will of God. We want to assess exactly how much I could possibly lift before I do anything, but God just wants us to start somewhere. Just go to work with what you know. Put into practice what you've already read in His Word. You don't need to know the whole Bible before you step out for God. You just need to know what you already know and use what you've got and begin to go to work. Just begin to go to work, because Paul said this. He said this. He says, then you will learn to know God's will for you. He doesn't say you will know it. He's like, you'll learn it. You'll learn it. I like what the NIV version says. It says, test and approve. Testing is the process, approving is the product. But there is a testing before there is approving. There is a process of God's will that He wants to take us on. We don't need to know the approved product. We don't know the end product. We just simply need to go on the process of walking with God, working it out every single step of the way. And this is what I know about God. Even in the wrong decisions, God can still work it for your good. God can still work it for your good, because maybe God's will isn't meant to be revealed futuristically. Because what I do know about God is He actually wants us to walk by faith. If I know every detailed plan that God has for me, it requires no faith to walk the journey. But maybe faith isn't in the futuristic, but maybe faith is stepping out, not even knowing, but trusting that God's still working even while I'm working, that God's working things together. So when I look back, I can see I started at 95 pounds. Now I'm at 225 pounds. God's been working all the way. Everyone say work. Work it out. Work it out. I love what Hebrews 10:36 says. It says you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. It's when you've done it, not before you've done it. It's when you've done it. It's when you've done the will of God. When you've put it to work. When you've just used the wisdom that God has given you and you've made a decision, not knowing is this the right decision or is it not. But God, I'm just going to trust you as I make a decision that you're going to use it and you're going to work it for my good. And you're going to make my decisions, even my weak decisions and my poor decisions, even the decisions that I shouldn't have made, if it lined up with what somebody else would have made who's more wise than me and more spiritual than me. But God, as a decision that I made, but God, you're able to work it for me. And when you've done it, God will reveal it, how He's worked it together. I want you to write down another word. Number 2, why don't you write down the word way? W-A-Y. Way. First word is work. Second word is way. You see, what I've learned is that weightlifting isn't just measured in what you can lift. It's not just measured in the what is the amount of weight that I can lift, but it's also determined by the way you lift. Can I preach this for a moment? Yeah. See, weightlifting has a lot to do with posture, doesn't it, AJ? The positioning, the form, how you hold the weight, how you position your body, how you can be a built person, but if you don't have a good core, you're not going to be able to lift the weight that AJ's lifting right now. You might be bigger than AJ, but he will crush you. His form will crush you. So there is. It's the way you lift. It's all about posture, keeping correct posture. I remember telling AJ when I first met him, I said, I want to lift heavy weight. That's the goal. He's like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to lift heavy things. I'm a man, come on. And then what he began to do is he began to take weight off my bar. And that's not the goal, man. He meant to be putting weight on. And he had to correct my posture by taking the weight off for a season. Yeah. where I could learn without the weight how to hold my position right, so then he could start to put weight back on. That's going to preach to somebody. There was a season where I just had to be in church. I had to just be in the season of just getting my posture right, knowing how to do it without the worries and without the weight and without the fears and the hurts. I just needed to just get that right, so then God could start to put more weight on me, put more responsibility on. And correct posture will help you in the way you carry. Maybe we could just show him that posture one more time. I'm going to make him work today. We've got 3 services, 3 campuses, 5 services. He's going to be working. Hope you brought a different shirt. Okay. So let's show him the posture. How many people want to see him do it one more time? Come on. Here we go. Watch the posture. I want you to watch the core. Here we go. This is great for podcast. There it is. Check that out. Straight overhead. Look at that core. It's tight. It's up. Bam. Oh my goodness. All the men are like, yeah. All the girls are like, just put it down. Come on. I can see it in your face. You're just hoping he makes it. And all the guys are like, come on, bro. You got this. Yeah. Mum is nervous. AJ's mum is here. She's nervous. But often we look at the will of God as what and when, don't we? We look at it as what and when. What can I lift? What's the amount? What do you have for me, God? What person am I meant to marry? And just as important, when is it going to happen? Because I'm ready for it now, God. What person do you have in mind for me, and when's it going to happen? Or what career do you have for me, and when should I make the move? When should I move from my tech job to my startup that I've got in my heart? When is the right timing? And what is that? What you have for me, God? I don't know. And you need to come next Sunday, because next Sunday I'm going to talk about career and calling. That's going to help some people out. But this is how we often view God's will. We look at it as what and when. But often, that actually falls in the realm of God's concealed will. We don't know. If you ask me, I'm going to say, I don't know. Right. I don't know what and when. I don't know what and when for my life, to be honest with you. I can't help you. But that's how we view it. We want to know what and when. Now, the Bible talks a lot about God's will. I mean, we could look in Psalms, and we could look in how David constantly talks about God's will. We could look in Hebrews. Hebrews talks about God's will. Ephesians talks about God's will. The Bible talks a lot about God's will, but just as much as the Bible talks about God's will, it also talks about God's ways. And whilst God's will in the what and the when is concealed, what is very evident in His Word are His revealed ways. How He wants us to live and who He wants us to be. So maybe the question isn't what and when. Maybe it's more about how and who. Oh, I'd expect a way bigger amen and applause for that role. Maybe it's not about the what and when. Well, what person am I meant to marry, and God, when is it meant to happen? Maybe it's about the how and the who, and the question you should be asking is what kind of husband I am going to be. How am I going to be that model husband? Who am I going to be? Maybe it's not what college that you're taking me to, but how I'm going to live when I get on campus, and how am I going to model Christ? How am I going to do it for the glory of God? Not what career path should I take, but how am I going to model the ways of God in that workplace, and how am I going to glorify Him? Maybe it's not what and when, but how and who? Just maybe. Maybe it's about the posture that I take. Maybe it's about the way I approach God's will. I love what Psalm 25 verse 4 says. It says, show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. That what I'm praying for and what the psalmist prayed for is that God would reveal very clearly His ways, and through revealing His ways, He would show me the path or His will in the direction I'm meant to take. Is this helping anybody? It's a practical series where we learn that God's will is in His revealed ways. So we actually approach God all the time from what and when. What career should I take, and when should I make the move? What college? What spouse? And when is it going to happen? And maybe it's less about what is the amount of weight that I can lift, but more is how will I lift it? That will be the very empowering key in my life. So instead of what, when, even where, but God, who do you want me to be? It's called applying God's will. Because you can sit in here and listen to a sermon on how to be a good spouse, but still have a sucky marriage because you didn't apply anything. You didn't apply it. You took notes, great colorful notes, but yet you didn't apply it. It's in the application of God's will that God's more concerned about. Because we want to discover God's will. We want to know it before we start it, but I don't think God wants us to discover His will. He wants us to discern His will. That as we look back, we realize that His will's been working every step of the way. All I did was I began to live out what was in His word, and I realized that I was in His will. I can't get a clap today. The deepest level of God's will, though, even beyond working it, and beyond I feel the way that I live, I feel that God's greatest goal for my life when it comes to His will is that I would want it. Why don't you write down the word want? Jesus said in John chapter 7, verse 17, anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or merely my own. Luke 22, verse 42, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. This is so powerful. This is so powerful. To want God's will. To want His will. It's different from wanting to know His will. It's wanting His will. It's wanting His will above your will. It's desiring His will for your life. It's in the area of desire, not just because of the benefits that it will bring me. I don't want to just do your will because it'll help me avoid relationship hang-ups, soul ties, and sexually transmitted diseases. It's not because of the benefits that come with following your will, but I want your will because it's your will. I want to follow your ways. I want your will for my life. And so often we kind of follow our will. We want our desires to be the forefront. But what God wants for us above all is, even beyond knowing His will, He wants us to want His will. Amen. I want to forgive people like I've been forgiven. I want to be able to know your will, because knowing your will help me know your purpose for life. You know, for me, sitting on the couch with a bag of Doritos is good motivation to go to the gym. But what's even greater motivation than realizing I need to work out is when you begin to work out and you begin to see that it's working. You look in the mirror and you're like, hey, what's up? Or is that just me? Just me and John. Where you're looking and you're like, oh, this is working. God, I want this more. I'm going to up the prayer life. I'm going to put you before me, and not just in my marriage, but maybe in my parenting, and maybe God, I can see how you're working in my marriage. So God, now I want it in my workplace. I want it in my career. God, I want it in every area of my life. God, not my will be done, but God, would it be your will? And I got to tell you this: when you seek His will is to fulfill all your desires and dreams. God will fulfill everything, but seek first His will. His will. And what we often do is, you might not sit there and say, I'm desiring my will. Maybe it doesn't look like that for you. Maybe it hasn't been a bold prayer of, God, I don't want to do what you have for my life. I want to do what I want for my life. Maybe it's not that blatant, but maybe it's been in the area of worry. Maybe you've been carrying the weight of worry. Maybe it hasn't been the weight of His will, but it's been the weight of fear. Fear of even missing it. You can look at weight like this and wonder, God, is your plan for my life still available? Have I missed it? Have I messed it up altogether? And we carry the weight of worry that ultimately works against God's will in your life. Because He wants you to have peace. He wants you to have a confidence. He wants you to walk by faith, not by sight. His ultimate goal for you is to trust Him, to walk each step, not to have worry as the weight that's holding you back and holding you down, but to say, God, even though I don't know what it is and maybe I can't work it out, but God, I can't put my trust in you. So God, I'm going to let go of worry today.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. For more information about C3 Silicon Valley, to plan your first visit, or to support this ministry financially, visit us at c3sv.com.